Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fired Up, the podcast for marketers working in early and late stage startups. I'm Morgan McClintock, the CEO of startup marketing agency Firebrand. We've launched this podcast to interview the best in the business, but I'm not going to do it alone. So please meet my co-hosts.
I'm Nicole Pytel, Firebrand's VP of Content Marketing.
And I'm Chris Ulbrich, Firebrand's Head of Media Relations.
I'm Ian Lipner, a tech PR and crisis communications veteran.
We'll drop a new episode each week, so there's plenty of fuel for your marketing fire. Get the spark you need to take your startup to a whole new level. Hello and welcome to Fired Up, the startup marketing podcast. My name is Morgan McClintock and I'm joined today by my co-host Chris Ulbrich.
Good to be here, Morgan. You know, so many startups share a common dream. They want to create their own category. And you can see why. Instead of fighting for attention in a crowded field, it sounds so much more appealing to strike out on your own and define a completely new space that's all about you. But is building your own sandbox all it's cracked up to be? How do you even get that kind of leverage? How much of it is about product? How much of it is about marketing? We're talking to someone who knows. Kashif Mahbub, Chief Marketing Officer at customer experience automation company Usher.
Yes, Kashif has been instrumental in creating 3 categories for different startups. He's an award-winning marketer who was most recently ranked as a top 30 most influential CMO in B2B by Finite. In a career spanning 20 years, Kashif has brought industry-defining products to a global market. He's built product and marketing teams as well as functions from the ground up and been instrumental in establishing these categories, as I said. Currently, he is the CMO at SF Bay Area-based Usher, and they are a leader in AI-powered customer experience automation. And we're going to talk more about that in a moment. He's also an advisor helping technology startups establish brands that punch above their weight. So Kashif, welcome to Fired Up.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
It's great to have you. I want to start today by talking about Slack. Now, they have just appointed a new CEO, Denise Dresser, as a story I'm reading here in Business Insider. And when I think about Slack, I think about a category creator, enterprise collaboration. They took something, chat and maybe file sharing, and combined a few things into a new category. So perhaps you could just tell us some of your thoughts about Slack and their story.
So Slack is so interesting. You know, I hit my 200 emails a day volume about 2004. And I was a brand new product manager, and it was so much internal and external email. And it never budged from 200. It went to 250. I kept track of that, I remember. So 200 emails a day stayed like that for years on end. And Slack was coming out at that time, and Slack wasn't first messaging app by any stretch there. But the first time I made a dent into that 200 emails a day was when I switched to Slack. And at Usher now, it's our de facto communication channel. And so they obviously did something right. So the interesting piece of Stuart Butterfield started Flickr, out of it came, and then did another pivot. Then he moved on from Yahoo to start Slack. For me as a marketer, it's a fascinating story about category creation where apparently there was already a category. So it's a lifesaver for a lot of us.
Yes, we were all using email and trying to keep up with, Yammer or Salesforce Chatter at the time until Slack came along and sort of redefined the whole space that had been around for decades. And so I absolutely agree with you. Let's start with the basics, though. When we're talking about category creation, what do we mean by a category?
So let's talk about what it's not, first of all. So it's not a moonshot project that you hand over to your star engineers. It's not a positioning sprint exercise that you hand over to your product marketing team. And it's certainly not a tagline you slap under your logo. And so category is, if marketing is an exercise in differentiation, then category creation is the epitome of that. That I think is probably the definition. It is the truest manifestation of differentiation is category creation. So it takes some audacity. You have to be audacious to think that I'm creating something and we are creating something that does not exist. So in my mind, at least, category creation is an exercise in positioning and really going out to market and sharing ideas that are unique. So that's how I define category creation.
If we think about the example of Slack, that raises a really interesting question, I think, which is how much of category creation is about the story you tell about your product and how much of it is about creating a product that is distinctive?
A day-to-day is fascinating question, always. You need both because the story without a product just is fluff. And marketing gets blamed for that many times. But a product without true differentiated marketing also it usually doesn't go anywhere. So in Slack's case, if you look at their trajectory just in 1 year, what they did was amazing product, word of mouth adoption, and they just went gangbusters from the get-go. But look at their spend. I was looking at the numbers. Look at their spend in sales and marketing about 2 years down the road. So in 2017, I think they brought it down to 50% of what they were doing in 2016. I may be off by a year here. So a good product gets you word of mouth, can get you traction, and Slack was a great example of using freemium as a model. A lot of companies have used freemium. Slack is one of the best manifestation of that model because they didn't just throw out freemium. If you remember Evernote, who is no longer around, I think, loved that product. They didn't survive because and they started freemium and all that, never converted into monetized model. Slack has done a great job of doing both. And so you can sign up very easily. So there was a lot of initial traction. But then they used their newfound fame and also the investments that they got to actually take that idea forward with investing in marketing, investing in sales, building the product out, building more functionality. I'm no way an advanced user of Slack. At Usher, we have kings and queens of Slack who do so much with Slack. It's fascinating to me every day. And so I think it's a balance. You cannot let product do all the talking for you, and you cannot let marketing do all the storytelling for you. It has to have that flywheel effect. The more word of mouth, the more value you get, the better investment you can make in the product, and then so on and so forth it goes.
So why do startups want to create a category in the first place? It's a lot of work. It takes time. It takes resources that are constrained. Why not sort of slot in and compete strongly within an existing category?
So I think in the startup world, we all, especially the founders and co-founders, we all think, and marketers as well, we all think that what we have, nobody else has. And so we go about the business of, we must create our own category. And it's not always true. You should not always be trying to create a category. And so why do that? Why go through the pain of, defining a new category? Because like I said before, there is no better manifestation of differentiation than having that category defined where you fit in an enterprise infrastructure or even an SMB infrastructure where you don't have to over and over define who you are. Think about Netflix, think about Uber, right? HubSpot literally defined inbound marketing. Were we not doing inbound marketing before that? We were, of course, right? But HubSpot, through their super amazing content strategy, completely redefined the industry. And so I still have tons and tons of HubSpot articles from way back on how to measure your marketing and how to present your marketing and what you should be doing about content and so on and so forth. And so coming back to your question about why do that? Because it is a painful, expensive process. And if you get it wrong, you end up spending a lot of time and resources. It's because when you get it right, you actually serve the customer much better. They can really hone in on solutions within a category much faster than if they have to look at 100 or 1,000 different vendors. So Gartner publishes about over 100 Magic Quadrants every year. And I've seen that number grow over the years. I've been working with them for like 25 years, right? And that's just Gartner. The Forrester, IDC, 451 Research, Everest Group. And why is that? It's because you want to make the buyer's life easy. When Gartner puts out a Magic Quadrant, now there are companies, especially in the US, that are required to show in their due diligence, looking at a Magic Quadrant and choosing out of the top 3 or top 5 A vendors that they end up with. And so this was not the case too many years ago. It's because that category definition has its value. It conveys a message to the buyer that, hey, this is a separate thing from what you've seen in the past. So various reasons, but I think it's making the buyer's life easier is probably the best way to convey it.
So how do you know as a founder that this is the right path for you to go on? You know, as a founder with relatively constrained resources, you have to place your bets on certain strategies and tactics. What are the signs that this is a good move for you to actually create your own category, try to create your own category? The signs that you are suited for it? And on the other side of it, what are some signs that this is not a good idea for you?
I'm not a founder, of course, but I've worked with enough founders and have gone through these conversations, including with our founder at Usher, co-founders at Usher. First of all, kudos to them of listening to an idea like that, because it's bonkers. It's audacious, like I said before. And it really, on one hand, they love the idea because they already believe this is why they started the company, that, hey, we are doing something that's absolutely unique that nobody else is doing, right? That's the premise behind pretty much every startup out there. Or we can do much better than what's out there in the market. So they are already bought in. But when you show them the timeline and the resources required and the investments required, and that's when you get the pushback, right? So I think this is important to understand again as to how the buyer behavior works. You start a company to present an idea, present a product, present a solution, because you want to make lives better. And that's the part that every category is pretty much honed on in terms of, but there are always products out there. But, until iPhone came out, were there no similar products before? There were, of course. I remember Nokia Communicator back in mid-90s or something. It was a beautiful product. Never caught on. So, various reasons, but everybody has to go in the process with their eyes wide open. This is, again, not something that is done overnight. And it doesn't always work either. And especially when you're a smaller startup with limited resources, you have to be very careful. But there are ways of figuring it out. So, for example, if you're finding out that what the world or analysts or buyers think is a list of vendors for a certain service or a product, and you're ending up competing with Google and Microsoft of the world, and you're a tiny little startup getting heard and making your voice heard, and, that's sort of an indicator sometimes. There are various other indicators. But sometimes that's an indicator. Another indicator, like what happened with Slack. Within 1 year, they have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of users like that. So that word of mouth immediately told them, hey, we have something very unique here. There was Yahoo Messenger and AOL Messenger. We've used all of those, right? But they caught on to something. So that's a different kind of indicator. And so looking for signals from the buyers, from the market, really gives you that, recognition that, yes, this is something I should be investing.
Right. So you've been involved in the creation of 3 categories. 1, customer communication management. 2, RPA, robotic process automation. And now you're doing customer experience automation. So you've seen this movie a few times and you know what the process should be. Okay, say we've got the founders, we've got the management team in, we're going to do this, and we understand, okay, look, the winner in a category gets most of the profits and most of the growth, and everyone else has to compete in our wake. It would be great to be that, right? But where do I start? We're going to do this. We've got the signal. Do I start with thinking about the name? Do I have to start with the product? Do I start with talking to analysts? Like, what is the first step or first few steps?
Whenever I'm asked this question, I'm reminded of a story. Two men are traveling in a train, sitting opposite each other. The first man says to the second man, "Hey, do you believe in ghosts?" Second man says, "No, I don't." First man disappears. So this is, by the way, considered as the shortest, fully structured story. It has 3 acts. There is a setup, there's a conflict, there's a resolution. Category creation follows exact same path. You have to have the setup. So you are setting yourself up as something brand new in the market. Then you invariably get into the conflict piece. There is no such thing, and this is something that my peers and my team know. They've heard me repeat it so many times. There's no such thing as a category of one, at least in the long term. Tesla was alone. Look at the EV market now. Netflix was alone. Look at the services, streaming services now, and so on and so forth. And we can, delivery services and all of that. You do have a timeline there. So setting yourself up to be positioned very uniquely in the market is step one. The buy-in from the entire company, and especially your executive team, is the number one point there. Without that, it doesn't happen. Like I said at the start, this is not a moonshot project. This is not a messaging exercise. It's something everybody needs to buy into, that, hey, we are doing something completely, entirely different. And so customer experience automation, we are bought into that idea that this is completely different from what's out there in the market at Usher. RPA, robotic process automation, was picked up in such pace that everybody realized, oh, this is a category on its own. There were so many naysayers who did not want it to be and still don't want it to be a category because it was so simple. Write a script that would automate your steps that you do over and over, and it becomes a bot. And so plenty of resistance, but there was the uptake and the investment and, the buyer behavior such that it established itself despite that conflict. And so the first step is that buy-in. The second step is just get ready for that conflict. It's like being pre-chasm in, crossing that chasm idea. You're pre-chasm when you're setting it up. And you'll spend sometimes a long time in that chasm before you get mainstream acceptance. So get ready and be ready mentally, physically, from a time and resources perspective that, hey, this is an investment. So you work with analysts, friends, you work with your existing customers, and you keep on building it over time. When you're lucky or when you have a fascinating product, just like in case of RPA or in Slack, it takes on a life of its own and it's easier. More often than not, it's not. You have to push that rock in a direction that nobody wants you to do. And so that doesn't happen without a single voice, a single thought. And so that's very important. And when you do have that traction, the resolution piece, you have to deliver the value. If you're making a statement that this is a brand new category that you need as a buyer, and then you deliver something that looks too similar or is not differentiated or is not delivering the value, then it falls flat and your category just vanishes at, warp speed. So those are some of the steps.
I think also there's also a notion of you're expanding you're expanding the market. So I don't know, Peloton, right? There were people who went to the gym and did spin biking, and there were people who had a bike at home. And then if you combine that experience, sort of digital experience to the home, suddenly it opens up a whole bunch of new people who want to buy that product, who weren't a member of the gym and who didn't buy an at-home spin bike. They were never interested in that. But now they would like this new product, please. So I do think that you could say the same about Slack. I do think that there's also this notion of expanding the market to tap into new buyers who would not normally be purchasing.
Absolutely. So there's a saying that I like a lot when we talk about category creation is that be self-serving, but not self-centered. What that means is you have to work with your competitors when you're creating, again, there's no such thing as a one product category until, I mean, there are exceptions, of course, but they are real exceptions. You will always find somebody doing a great work there. So in all the categories that you've mentioned, whether it's customer communication or RPA or in Slack's case, I would go as far as saying, work with your competitor, because I have, to make a case that, hey, this is something that is outstanding. And especially talking with our analyst friends, when you get bundled up with the Salesforce or the Google or the Microsoft of the world who have huge machineries, and of course they have products, everything under the sun that you can imagine, especially as an enterprise buyer, then having your own cohort telling the same story, and it goes a long way in convincing buyers, convincing those who help establish categories like analysts. Yeah, it goes a long way to make that a reality.
For a marketing head who is thinking about how to allocate resources to this kind of campaign, how nuts and bolts does a category creation campaign look different from one where you're duking it out in an established field? Where do you place your bets differently? Where do you allocate your resources differently?
Like I said, it's not a campaign. It is the DNA of your company. You either have it or you don't. So it's a matter of getting that DNA out in the open and keeping always that center there. Everything that you do, every message that you put out, whether it's your website, whether it's your sales pitch that your sales team is doing day in and day out, whether it's a SDR outreach email script that is being put out there, all of those should come from that central point of view. But if you try to outreach with a very unique idea, it's very difficult you get a lot of resistance very quickly. So it's important to convey the value first and then back into that idea. Because if you put forward a very big idea very early in your conversation, especially sales related or SDR related conversations, it falls flat. People are like, what are you talking about? But if you talk from their pain point, the buyer's pain point, focus on use cases instead of focusing on your product or solution, that works much better. At Usher, our go-to-market is use case based. We are open about it. We don't go forward and try to sell the platform. We try to solve the problem. And when you take that and then you back into your campaigns, your website, your talk tracks, your messaging, then it's much easier to write that out. So if you visit a homepage, it will say customer experience automation or RPA. But within that, you have to very quickly define what it means for me as a buyer. Are you going to solve it for me, or are you just trying to sell me something? That heart of the whole thing should never go away. Because the moment it goes away and it becomes the biggest thing, that's when you start eyes glazed over and, people don't want to listen to you. So from a pure marketing org standpoint, I work very closely with my product marketing team, my demand gen team, in terms of, let's sit together and let's see how we can ensure that as we are focusing on solving use cases and providing great solutions, that we are always conveying the message that, hey, it is all about this unique idea that we are presenting. And if you keep it subliminally in there rather than trying to be too in your face kind of thing, in cases of Slack or RPA, it's very easy to understand. People see value very quickly. But in some other cases, customer communication, it's not so easy to understand. Hey, I already have a email system. I already have a chat bot. I already have this. What are you talking about? So that's where you have to focus on the solution to a pain point first, and then back into your bigger idea.
Are there certain materials or activities, marketing activities, that you need to do more or you need to do more often at a startup where you're trying to create your own category? Or does the shape of the marketing program look pretty much identical? It's just all about in the execution.
Both, always both. It's a flywheel effect. You have to have the execution right, but your product and your ideas need to work at the same time as well. And so how do you do that? What are some of the, critical things that you should be doing from the get-go? It's not just working with analysts. It's an important part, of course. And by analysts, I don't mean Wall Street analysts. I mean Gartners, Forresters, IDCs of the world. They are great resources as well. But they can be quite expensive, especially for startups to work with. So I've been working with all of my friends at Gartner and Forrester and IDC and Everest Group for years on end, and they will agree with me that they're not the cheapest option out there. But there's a reason for that, because you get exposure very quickly. So there's that part of the work. But the focus needs to be on the buyer. So how do you get the message out to the buyer? In Slack's case, it was the product. They just put the product out and said, this is an amazing thing we've built. So word of mouth and what we call PLG now, product-led growth took them to where they are today. PLG is not a new idea. It's been around forever. And so getting the product out in the hands of the users that matter. And so that bottom-up pressure towards the decision makers is important. Building that community. Category creation, in my belief, gives you the biggest, strongest moat around your brand, around your business than anything else, if you get it right. And it takes time. But when it's established, it's like a moat. It works for you. People get trained on your platform. They become spokespeople for your product. Nothing like it. When it's working, it's a beautiful thing to see.
And how do you address the challenges in terms of messaging out there on your own? It seems to me that one of the great advantages, maybe one of the only advantages to fighting it out in an established field, is that you don't have to constantly explain what you're doing and what your product is offering, and differentiation becomes, simpler because you could make those matrices that we're all familiar with and line up the competitors and check off your features versus theirs. And it's very easy to see where your product is different from theirs. But if you're out in a field on your own, you don't have the advantage maybe of being able to rely on a Gartner Magic Quadrant that will lump you in, or, there might not be a reporter covering the beat. There's no one out there who thinks it's their job to cover you. Just thinking from a media outreach perspective. So what are some strategies in your experience for overcoming those challenges?
Audacity. Got to be audacious about how you approach your market. You got to pick up the phone, email that email. And often founders and co-founders, they are great at that. They are the first proponents of that idea and promoters of that idea. So I work very closely with our co-founders for that reason, because whenever people see my title, their eyes glaze over. It's like marketing guys talking. But it starts with the founding team, with the founders, and they are the best to convey that idea, and usually the best salespeople for their company. But after that, it is the marketing strategy that you have to implement in a very structured way. And it has to be 360-degree across the board. You cannot just think that if I start writing blogs about this, that will be sufficient. Or if I start showing up at events, that will be sufficient. Or if I start sending out emails and start buying lists or things like that. It's all of the above. It's not one or the other. Of course, budgets are limited, especially these days. But you can still do a lot. There is so much free out there. Marketing does not require, and I'll get shot down by somebody for saying that, the budgets are always going to be limited. You can always do more. I mean, my budget in my past life, what I have now is very different from, what I used to have in larger organizations. What does that mean? That means you have to be creative. And so, create a 360-degree marketing strategy. Don't rely on just a couple of channels. You do not know, especially in the B2B, bigger enterprise space, who's buying when. The ideas of dark funnel and all of that, they're all out there. And you spend a lot of time there. I spend a lot of time with our demand gen team on that as to discovering the intent, yes. But that also means, I remember, sitting down with an insurance executive. This was 15 years ago. And I was young enough to ask him a question that, how do we find you when you have the budget and you're looking for a solution? His answer was very simple. You don't know. Just stay in front of me. And that was the best answer he could give. And so how do you stay in front of them? It's all the channels. Don't just bombard them with emails. But now social media plays a big role. And that's why you have to be on social media. You have to train your SDR team to say the right things at the right time. You have to work very closely with your sales team to make sure that they are closing deals, but also leaving behind the idea of that category. And then the customer success and customer marketing. That's probably the most untapped area that I see companies not paying enough attention. The landing and the expanding model, even without, if you don't think like that, remember that your customer today, they're working in one place. Tomorrow they will be, maybe taking a CIO role in some other company. And so staying very close to your customer is probably the best marketing you can do. But bottom line, you got to choose your channel. Cannot be one thing. And you have to have a very clear strategy in terms of what is the message you're putting out.
We're going to create a category. Our competitors, we're ready, because if we're successful, our competitors are going to just start mirroring our terminology, right down to the homepage on their website. They're going to use the same kind of words, and that can be very frustrating. But if you've done your homework here, you're ready for that. What do you do in the opposite case, where you're in a category and you see a competitor using new language, starting to gain traction? The sales team are getting feedback that is something that buyers are looking for. You run the risk of being depositioned as a subset of some other macro category. What do you do in that case?
Trying not to run after everything that shines, is right. The first. The glittering new things are abundant, especially in the technology space. Every day there is something new. We are in the world of generative AI right now, and I'm not underplaying that in any way, shape, or form. We are actually using a lot of it. It's a transformational space in technology now. If you do the setup right, if you believe that what you already have is, highly differentiated, highly valuable to your buyers, and it's, world changing and life changing, and you stick to your plans. You just need to be aware of, having, like I said, having competitors is a great thing. That confirms that what you're trying to create is not just your pie in the sky idea. It's actually bought by others as well. And so that back and forth, and that's, it's a great thing. We attend I go to a lot of events as well. And often you see somebody coming over and rush to talk to our competitors. Why? Because without them, again, you're back to the idea of a single product category, which doesn't fly.
Right.
But how do you outmaneuver your competitors in terms of, if they are doing something new? Sticking to your basics is important. Sticking to your principles is important. But also being very, very quick and nimble. One thing that startups should never forget they have to be is nimble and fast. Because otherwise you're not a startup. Otherwise you're a behemoth that moves slow, nobody wants to do it. And so if you're a startup, you see all of these things happening, and your competitor could be big or small. Bigger companies, the day we launched the idea of customer experience automation, 4 days later, 2 days later, there was a entire microsite launched by a much larger competitor. And so what do you do in that case? You continue to build your volume of messaging. You continue to talk to your customer, make them your spokespeople. And so the more it happens, it's about the belief. And if you try to counter those things too much, you get distracted. And there are technologies, SEO, SEM, use all the tools that you have. That's marketing strategy, or strategy in general, is a very militaristic approach to everything. And you got to fight your battles.
I think that's great advice. Stick to your plan. I see a lot of startups get distracted by what their competitors are doing, whether it's, hey, here's an article that they like, or hey, they've started saying this, and they get frustrated, and you can start then defraying your resources in lots of different areas.
One thing that you will see, and it happened in Slack's case as well. They were building a game. They came out with Slack, a messaging tool, because it was part of a game. They built Stuart Butterfield built, with his team, Flickr, and something else came out of that. And so understanding the market signals is very important. You launched an idea, it's not working out. Sticking to your guns for too long can be fatal, right? And so you have to be nimble on your feet, and you have to know what is working and maybe take that idea and grow it. And so categories can be created out of, brilliant ideas that may not be so apparent at the get-go. And so I want to make sure that it's not about sticking to your guns at all costs. It's about being very thoughtful, look at the signals that are coming back to you, and really, maneuver around the minefields and then discover new things in your own environment.
I think that's a good clarification. Thank you. What about category collapse? Sometimes, it starts to catch on and then it gets eclipsed by another category. I guess you see some of those signals if you're listening to them. That might happen in advance, but category collapse happens.
Technology goes forward, yeah, of course. Technology continues to evolve, continues to develop. AI has been around for 50 years, right?
Yes.
But suddenly we have Gen AI. So what happened? Did AI go away? No. We are evolving as humans, and we are evolving as humans who develop technology. So there's always something better. So and that would come and take over a category. If you're smart, you would see it coming and you would make your pivots, or you would make your investments in the right place at the right time to ensure that you're simply not played out. You're not the blockbuster then. So I remember having this very specific conversation in my business school finance class in 2003, 2004, where we had a speaker, I won't name names. He came on. It was Blockbuster versus Netflix conversation. Netflix had just gone public the year before in 2002. The stock was $19 something, and Blockbuster was $20 something. And our speaker was insisting that Blockbuster is moving online and doing DVD shipping. They're going to destroy Netflix. And I was just flabbergasted. So we had a back and forth in terms of how can you say that? And so sometimes it's very difficult and the speaker was an analyst, so sometimes very difficult to see through all of that. And it does happen, but there's a lot of opportunity in it as well. And so as a startup, the beauty about startup is that you can be very nimble. You can make those moves very quickly. The difficulty and that's why, so the incumbents are like these big tankers, takes a while to move them around, but they also have the resources to really revamp and resurrect themselves in a different way, but not many of them are capable of that. So that brings in the opportunity to the small guys. And so thinking through it, if a new technology coming in, you have to be very quick in terms of how do we leverage this new technology to convey and further our idea or pivot to a different idea. That's critically important to keep an eye on.
So we're going to create a category. What outcomes will our startup see if we do create it once we've sort of named, framed, and claimed our new category?
The biggest outcome is, again, back to that you're now a well-known entity. But I think the ultimate goal here is that you become essential. Mm-hmm. So if CRM was a category already when Salesforce came out, the Siebel systems and all those systems. Now, if you look at any ranking anywhere, Salesforce stands on its own. And so what has happened? What has happened now is that if you're ever buying a CRM system, that's the number one name that you will consider. And that's the ultimate goal. As a marketer, I want our company, our brand, to be in front of the buyers and top of mind when they are making a decision. That's the ultimate win. The first thing they think about is our brand, is our name. You have won half the battle there, right there. Because if marketing is nothing else, it is that. It is to make sure folks think about you, even if they are going away and buying something else because maybe you're too expensive, maybe you're not I just made a decision with my team on bringing on an account-based marketing tool product. And we looked at, 6 different products, and we went with somebody that's not, top of the market, because we could not afford 6 cents. Because 6 cents is a great tool, but it's too big a hammer for us right now, for example. But we knew 6 cents is out there, and they are the leader, and we did take a look at them. So that's the ultimate goal, to be part of the conversation.
Consideration set.
As humans, we want to be part of every conversation, and our name to be coming up. As companies, it's the same thing. We want our name to be as part of, at top of the list in a conversation when folks are considering putting some investment down.
Having said all this, in closing, looking ahead 2024, what are some of the big trends you're seeing? What are some predictions you might make for the coming year?
So I think the first thing, we've talked about category creation a lot, but you don't always have to create a category. Let's establish that, first of all. There are, like I said, hundreds of categories out there. So if you fit well in one of them and you have a very unique, differentiated offering, that's your calling. Go after that with all you got. It does not mean you go in and try to create a category. But if you do get an opportunity, it's the best way to go about life. It's the life as a marketer, at least. And that's what gets me excited as to I'm working on really establishing a brand that stands on its own, has a, its own place in the world. So 2024, so we are living in some very strange times. There are all kinds of pressures that you see, macroeconomic and microeconomic pressures especially on startups. We've seen layoffs. We've seen a lot of turmoil in the market. At the same time, we are starting to see the mergers and acquisitions activity pick up. We've seen Slack acquisition. We've seen these big deals happening. Just last week, the $100 million plus M&A deals actually, are picking up again. So it's a mixed market, and you have to be careful where you put your limited resources. There are always limited resources. I think that one thing that never changes is that the focus on value delivery. And if anything that has happened in the past 2 years since the pandemic is that focus from the buyers on, are you really delivering value to me? And what is your timeline of that delivery? The time to value is probably single biggest indicator of success today. We hear from companies large and small, like, hey, I bought your $100,000 platform. How soon my team can start getting value out? Or how soon my customers can get a better experience because I bought your platform? That's a single biggest point right now. And that should always be the case. It's not driven by anything. But when budgets are squeezed, when everything has to be approved by a CFO, when your lands are, you're doing whale hunting especially, all of those things aside, that focus on value delivery has to be top of mind. And if there ever was a time, this is it.
So I think that's a great jumping off point. If you are delivering the value, then you can, in a differentiated way, and you're being bold and courageous about it, you can create your category. And now is a good time when all their competitors are also constrained. If you feel you have the ingredients to do that, you can make that play. So it is exactly the time to do that.
It's counterintuitive. I'll make a last point. It's a great point, Morgan, what you just said. So we've seen, those of us who've been in the Bay Area, we've seen the ups and down cycles. Down cycles produce more startups than up cycles, right?
Yes.
There's a lot of talent available. People want to try new ideas. The 2008 financial crisis produced so many great startups, right? And so it's counterintuitive. So tougher times actually are better times to bring out newer ideas, create newer categories, and provide better value. And whoever does that ends up either creating a category or winning an existing category. So great point there.
I think it'll be exciting to see who comes out this phase, absolutely over the coming year. Our next section is called Smart People, Dumb Questions, in which I pick out questions out of a bag on my desk here. And the first one here is, what is one item on your bucket list?
One item on my bucket list. I think it has to be visiting places and traveling. So doing all of that. I would love to visit some places that I have not visited. So I've jumped out of planes, used to do parachute jumping for a while in my life, and I was crazy enough. Would love to, so I ride motorcycle. And I would love to, go to the Bonneville Salt Flats and try for a speed record or something like that. Yeah. At some point in life.
Okay, I like that. World speed record on a motorbike. All right. Did not have you down for that one. I was thinking, and I'm thinking, I'd like to go to China, and you've got something completely different. What book would you recommend the most?
So over time, of course, we all tend to shift towards nonfiction, I think, because we work and we like to read about. So I read a lot of marketing books, and I would not recommend a marketing book because there are plenty of knowledge there to go about. The books that I think go over every year since I was a teenager is this book called 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And it's it's a tome of a book. It's pretty thick. And I don't know how many times I've read it. It's the idea of magical realism. It's just a magical book. And it just makes you think about the world in a very, very different way. And so nothing to do with marketing, nothing to do with business. But if you read it, you will get some ideas about life, which is related to marketing and business and all that. So highly recommended if you have not. G.G. Marquez, Gabriel Garcia Marquez is a favorite author of mine. And anything by him. Yeah.
I think it's important to read lots of different types of things and get ideas from different places. So, and I have a large pile of business books unread on my desk. So, yeah, we don't need to add to that.
Same here.
What's the most unexpected turn your life has taken?
Wow. Yeah. Never thought to be where I am when I was growing up. I grew up in a very different part of the world.
Yeah.
I grew up in Pakistan and went to boarding schools and all of that. Never thought that I would be sitting here talking to you.
A high-powered Silicon Valley exec.
Yeah, more than just that. It's just a human connection of different types. And that's what you get especially out of traveling. So I always wanted to travel. I was with a friend of mine. We took a trip to Mongolia and we were backpacking through the Gobi Desert. And talk about technology having an impact. In the middle of Gobi Desert. Middle of absolutely nowhere. And, we were sitting with some nomads and I turned around and I look at this kid and he was playing Candy Crush on his phone. So impact of technology is limitless. So it's lovely to see. You can see that in a negative way as well. But I was just laughing there, sitting like, wow, we've come a long way.
We're all very similar in those ways. I think you're going to have a good answer to this. What's the oddest thing that you've ever eaten?
It's not so odd. I am not very. I'm not very.
Out in the desert.
Yeah,
nomads. I'm sure they must eat some unusual things whilst they're playing Candy Crush.
That was a lot of boiled meat, but unwittingly, the first time I ate, and the only time I think, nothing wrong with it, just not my thing, is frog legs. And I had gone through like 10 of them before I found out they were frog legs. It was in Singapore. We were sitting there, and I kept eating. I was like, "This is delicious. What is this?" Like they look like chicken, but they're too small. And our host said, "Yeah, they're frog legs." Like, yes, I kept eating. So
try them once.
Yeah, try them once for sure.
And then you're like, okay, yeah. I've done that. Yeah. But no one ever asks you if you've ever eaten them until now. Our next section is called the Fired Up 5, so it's our quick fire round, so take it away, Chris.
All right. Yes, as Morgan says, this is our rapid fire series of questions. So quick questions, quick answers. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right, here we go. What do you wish you had known before you got into marketing?
How many times I would have to explain what marketing is to
What is the best career advice you were ever given?
don't get comfortable. That's the best advice. Do not get comfortable.
What is the tool or gadget that is not ChatGPT you've recently started using?
Not too recent, but Notion, the app Notion. So everything, my life revolves around that all day long.
What is one big thing you've learned in the last year?
Has to be the importance of empathy. The more you work with folks and the more you manage teams and you build teams, none of that can work. No team can work without that. And I continue to learn, always knew about this, but it continues to be the single most important aspect of building a business, building a team, and winning, and that's empathy.
And what tactic are most brands overlooking?
I'll go back to the value delivery mechanisms that a lot of times marketing especially can make that mistake of, taking your eyes off of the value delivery. The whole purpose of anything that we do is that, right? So it should not be, I'm trained as an engineer, was a product manager for a while. So for me, it's like the product is everything or the service is everything. So everything we do in marketing comes from that as to, hey, this was created by very, very smart people with value in mind that they want to deliver. So my job is to be the conduit and be the deliverer of that value. And so it's critically important to not take your eyes off of the value that we are delivering to folks who put their faith in our products and our services.
Kashif Mahbub is the CMO of Usher, the customer experience automation platform, a new category that he's creating. Kashif, thanks so much for being here with us on Fired Up. I've enjoyed talking to you. If people want to get in touch with you, where should they go?
I think LinkedIn would be the easiest. So if you search for Kashif Mahbub at LinkedIn, you probably will find me. There are many other Kashif Mahbubs as well. But pleasure. This was absolute pleasure. Morgan, Chris, thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot. We look forward to talking to you soon.
Likewise.
Well, that about wraps it up for today. But before we close, we did want to offer all of our Fired Up friends a chance to grab a mega pack of all of our ebooks and guides. That's our guide to content marketing. That's our startup guide to paid media using Google Ads. It's our guide to attribution. You can get all of those, over 100 pages of goodness, at firebrand.marketing/fired up freebies. That's freebies with an S. And we hope you enjoyed the show. And if you did, please give us a rating wherever you get your podcasts or drop us a note at firebrand.marketing. And as ever, the details of how to get in touch with our guest today can be found in the show notes. Thank you for listening. And until next week, get out there and crush your marketing goals.